can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Weiss here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Sean Grabowski of Keepers Digital. Sean, before I formally introduce you, I always like to point out other episodes of the podcast people should check out. Since this is part of the Top Agency series, let's think of some of the fan favorites. I had Adee Clevitt on. Adee Clevitt is an agency, Sean, that does done-for-you SOPs. So she goes into a company, if someone wants to smooth out their onboarding process with a client, with a staff member, or just document, get stuff out of the staff's head, makes that repeatable process. That's what she does. So we geeked out on her favorite software, productivity tools. So that was a really good episode. Another one was with Todd Taskey. Todd Taskey helps pair agencies with private equity. So he helps sell agencies. He's got the Second Bite podcast, Second Bite, because he's found sometimes when people sell their agency and the private equity sells again, sometimes those founders make more on the second bite than they do on the first. So that was a really good one. The valuation space, agency space, and just M&A business in general. More episodes on InspiredInsider.com. This episode is brought to you by Rise25. At Rise25, we help businesses give to and connect to their dream relationships and partnerships. How do we do that? We do that by helping you run your podcast. We're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. We do the strategy, the accountability, and the full execution. So, Sean, we kind of call ourselves the magic elves that run in the background to make it look easy so the host can create amazing content, amazing relationships, and most importantly, run their business. For me, the number one thing in my life is relationships. I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships, and I found no better way over the past decade to profile the people and companies I most admire and share with the world what they're working on. So if you thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, go to rise25.com or email us at support@rise25.com. I'm excited to introduce Sean Grabowski. He's the founder of Keepers Digital, and Keepers Digital is a top Google Premier Partner PPC marketing agency. They specialize in ads on both the Google and Meta side. They help companies scale their businesses by managing ad campaigns that are profitable, data-driven, and measurable. And he has worked with brands and companies such as Nestle, Hugo Boss, Calvin Klein, Tiffany, Public Storage, Deloitte, Spotify, Goodyear. I can go on and on. There's a laundry list of these, Sean, but thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Happy to be here and have a conversation.
So why don't you start us off and talk about Keepers Digital and what you do. As you're doing that, I'm going to pull up the site for people to see.
Yeah, of course. So Keepers Digital is a PPC agency. I wish we had the new website up, but this is the legacy one that's been around for a while now. We basically specialize in ads on Google, anywhere, any platform within Google Ads. So that includes Google Display, Google App Network, Google Shopping Ads, YouTube, and search. Google owns a whole bunch of different places where you can advertise. We also run ads on Meta. We do a little bit of ads on TikTok and LinkedIn, and of course, Bing. For anyone who's in the marketing space, Bing, essentially, you can duplicate campaigns from Google into your Bing account. And we help companies either maintain a consistent lead flow or sales flow with self-owned ad campaigns, or grow. A lot of companies come to us when they're looking to scale. Naturally, when you're trying to grow, there's a lot of organic and other ways you can do it, but ads is one of those methods that helps you have a self-owned channel where you can pull the dial back and forth on how much you want to invest, and you can have a predictable outcome as long as you have a mature account that you've dialed in well.
How did you get into Google Ads?
Great question. So I actually got into marketing through the creative side of it. Funny enough, I used to write quite a bit. In the early days of my career, I was writing quite a lot, was really into videography and photography. A lot of my close friends are still in that industry. And I started working at a local agency in my hometown where I did everything. It was kind of an entry level paid internship, entry level type job. And I did a little bit of everything. I got really fascinated with Google Ads pretty quick. It's
What did
not
that agency do? What was the specialization of them?
so we ended up specializing. It was a pretty small local business. They didn't even have a niche at the time. Once I started working with them, they actually ended up launching a software company that took off. But they specialized about halfway through my time working there in helping nonprofits.
Got it. And so were you starting to experiment with that company, with Google Ads?
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So fortunately for nonprofits, Google gives them a $10,000 per month ad spend grant. It's something a lot of people in the nonprofit or the marketing space have heard about. And what that allowed us to do is go after nonprofits and as clients and offer a package that was really beneficial to them, where we helped them manage that $10,000 ad grant. And that gave me my first kind of exposure to Google Ads. And I was fascinated by how analytical it is and how leverable it is. That might be a strange word to describe it, but you can really make a difference for a company if you can master ads. They can make a massive impact. So that really fascinated me, just the potential of it.
I've heard before, Sean, that sometimes these nonprofits, it's even sometimes hard to spend the 10,000 a month. Did you find that to be the case?
It absolutely is.
That sounds strange. Like, okay, especially now, maybe it's a little different animal when you're advertising for nonprofits.
Yes. So there's a bit of a catch-22 in that Google says, okay, we'll give nonprofits $120,000 broken into $10,000 a month. But there's a whole bunch of restrictions on those accounts. There's rules. You can't spend it on display campaigns. You can't spend it on single keywords. So for example, lawyer, just making that up. Not that any lawyer would really ever want to target something as broad as that, but essentially there's a lot of restrictions, and it's very hard to be able to work with those restrictions and still be able to spend effectively. So that is something that over the years, and it has changed. The tricks that allow you to spend 10K efficiently have changed over the years. There's always a trick though. So usually if you're working with a good PPC expert, they can spend the 10,000, but it's not something that's easy to do without somebody who knows what they're doing.
You work for the smaller agency, and then what was next in the journey?
So I'm Canadian. I grew up in Ontario near Toronto. Toronto's the big city near me. And I met several people there from my university, met up with them. And a lot of them were working at bigger agencies or bigger companies. So I initially ended up, through one of them, getting an opportunity at a company called Group M. Group M, for anyone who hasn't heard of it, is one of the biggest ad companies in the world. They have companies they have offices and several agencies that they own in almost every major capital city and in the developed world. And I was able to, very fortunately, from basically my second position onward, be working on household name accounts with really large budgets, literally going to the Google headquarters, getting training directly from the source, and being exposed to some of the biggest, most complex ad accounts that are in North America.
What were some of the things you learned at Group M? I'd love to hear, not just from like the ad perspective, but from the infrastructure perspective, right? Because most people don't get to experience that type of infrastructure and the management and the meetings. Talk about the infrastructure piece that you learned.
Yeah, there's a lot of different things I learned there. And I think some of them were about downsides of working at a big corporate company. And I'll explain those too. It's not all perfect, but ultimately, when you're dealing with big enterprise companies that are spending a lot of money, they really, communicating and keeping them happy is a whole political game, right? It's customer service mixed with how do you give them what they want while also being allowed, getting their permission and blessing to do what you need to do in their ad accounts to actually get them good results. So I think the thing that I would say I learned the most was probably management. I ended up managing a small team, and then a bigger team through my time at Group M. and you get exposed to learning about people and how to work with people and how to manage things and how to check in with them while also getting your own work done. I got a lot of exposure to that, which has helped me a lot nowadays with my own business. And the other thing I would say is really navigating clients. You get a lot of exposure to clients, and they're not just clients spending small amounts of money. These are clients where literally their bonus or their salary is dependent on the outcome of what their agencies are being able to produce. So you really have to learn the fine art of talking to clients, giving them what they need, pushing back. You do have to push back and inject your expert opinion. And there's a fine balance between all of that. And I felt like that was something, those are probably the two things I learned the most there, truthfully. The technological side is stuff that I've continued getting better at actually since leaving, I would say.
Talk about the management side for a second. What are it could be mistakes that you learned from maybe someone else or that you made, lesson from the management side that people could take home. They're thinking, Sean, I would like to be a better manager in my company.
Yes, I would say, maybe being too nice. And I'm a very, I think anyone on my team would say I'm a pretty great manager. I don't even mean to be cocky. I don't mean it like that. I just mean I have a good relationship with everyone. I explain our boundaries. I explain our goals, and it allows us to be completely aligned. But in the past, that was a lesson I had to learn a few times. There were employees that maybe I let things slide for too long as I was learning how to manage people. You just kind of assume that people are doing things, assume they know what they're doing. And that was also because I didn't know what I was doing as a manager back then. But you need to make sure that that people are getting what they need to succeed. And you need to be able to have some kind of mechanism for monitoring that. And it's not about being a strict manager. It's just about workability. For this to be a well-oiled machine that runs smoothly, workability is the baseline, right? We just need things to work. And if things work, then the clients are happy, the team is happy, the upper management is happy, everyone's happy. So how do we just remove the emotion out of it, remove the perspective out of it, and just get down to the brass roots of what allows things to work? So I would say nowadays what I do is I support the team extremely well, especially when they are brand new. When people are new, I give them tons of attention because you need to give people the opportunity to learn and feel supported so that they don't feel anxiety in those moments. We don't make our best decisions when we're in a state of anxiety and stress. And through making them comfortable and know how to do things, we also will be, that's usually how you end up with them being more independent later as well. So I could talk about that for a long time. SOPs are also something that I think the corporate world, there's a lot of SOPs in certain areas, but there's also a lot, surprisingly, in the world of small business, since becoming friends with tons of other entrepreneurs and business owners and agency owners. I truly think that the corporate world, there was a lot of lacking on my old teams of specific processes. So again, when the team doesn't know how to react to a client, instead of them having to figure it out and be in the dark and just guess because they don't know, how do you create a resource for them where they can always leverage that resource so they don't have to make mistakes? That's something that's management's job. If your team is making errors and making mistakes or feeling stressed and anxious, that means that there is something missing in your systems that allow them to do what they need to do. You need to take self-ownership and responsibility for it, whether you're a founder or an operator or a manager. You can put better systems in place to support your team.
Did you find that there were strong SOPs at the larger agencies or not so much?
To be honest with you, not so much. There were in some capacities. I'll say onboarding. Onboarding had strict regimented protocols. These contracts need to be signed. All these training documents need to be done. After you're done this module, then you'll get a company email that has access to all the other things. And there were these very regimented processes. But for work delivery, there were certain things that were just laid out like, this is what we do at this time. This is what we do at this time. This is what we do at this time. And there was a lot of gaps in between that. that were actually pretty subjective. And I don't think it's that. I just think it's not really, the word SOP is something I didn't even hear until I left corporate. I literally never even heard it. So I think that mentality of like entrepreneurs were always thinking that is something that I think I know a lot of people who have talked to this stuff about, they've brought it into their corporate workplaces and they've been absolutely thriving as a result of it. I think that's something that employees we often think that things are laid out for us, but if you can come in and create a process that makes things better, the company will appreciate you for it. And not many people are going to be willing to do that.
Yeah, a couple things that stuck out for me, Sean, on that. Thanks for sharing the management stuff, which is, being too nice. Also just going over and explaining goals and also boundaries, right? And people have their certain expectations. One thing I've heard you talk about when I was doing research for this is from a client, you're talking about, kind of navigating customer service and results. And I've heard you talk about managing expectations with the client, right? I'd love to hear a time when you had to manage expectations and maybe, like you mentioned, pushing back a little bit. Does one stick out for you, managing expectations with a client?
Absolutely. It's something we do every day. And it's something that I think, if you look at it this way, if a client, there are rules. They're not rules, but they are almost laws as to the physics of how ads work. Ads, for example, they learn from data. When you're using campaigns, they learn from conversion data. So you need conversions happening to even benefit from the learning, right? If you have no conversions, then you don't have any momentum yet. And that's what companies are dealing with when they're starting from scratch with marketing. So almost every day, in my role nowadays, running the team and helping grow the business, I help a lot of sales calls. I had 2 this morning, probably going to have another one after this from somebody who's asking for a conversation. And the realistic time for where the vast majority of my managing expectations comes is basically during the onboarding stage and during sales. Because the truth is, if you're brand new, if your company investing in ads for the first time and you have no data about what works and what doesn't, nobody can go in there and just turn ads on and get you a zillion sales. That's a pipe dream. That goes against the physics of how ads work. Even if you strip out the fact that AI learns from who buys from you to then show ads to more people who are like those people who buy from you, to do that, you need to have data feeding the AI first. So you have to go through the painful period of acquiring data manually. It's undeniable. The other thing is just ads in general. The science of it is a scientific method where you're trying one thing and you're trying another. This is an oversimplified example, but if you try one ad, you try one ad, you try one ad, you let the data do the talking of which one drives results. And then you move forward to phase 2, where you create more ads that are like the ad that worked. And then you double down and things get better and better incrementally. So long story short, I get tons of people coming to us saying, this month, I had somebody come to me saying, hey, we have a charter company. We need to get the New Year's is coming up. That's our biggest day of the year. We need to get sales. We don't have ads running. This is December 15th. It takes a week to even start ads. And then it takes 2 to 3 months to ramp up ads. And that's just the industry standard. Some businesses, it takes 4 or 5 months, sometimes 6. And that's just how ads work. So I have to manage people's expectations all the time during onboarding. And it's not for me to bring them down to reality. It's because inevitably, if their expectation is here, and this is what I'm actually capable of delivering, even in a best case scenario, our relationship isn't going to work because they're inevitably going to end up happy. But the problem there is that the delta between realistic and this is a made up situation. They will be upset about not getting something that's not even possible to achieve. So I have to bring them back down to earth and then gauge their interest again. That's realistic. This is how ads work. Do you still like the sound of it? This is what every business that goes through every business that has successful ads goes through that painful start. That's something that I have to explain to people every single day, honestly.
Sometimes I feel like when you talk about this, it can be a client selection because some people may go, Sean, sure, let's just do it. But they never really, I don't know if you've experienced this, maybe didn't hear everything you were saying. It was like, yeah, let's just get started, Sean. And then their expectation is still at the point where they were before. I don't know if you've found that to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've the longer I run this business, the more I have it baked in reminders that that's what to expect. Just because, again, things go over people's heads. Sometimes we don't hear what people are saying, and we just hear what we want to hear. And we all do that. We're all victims of that from time to time. So what I do is I have mentions of that in my discovery call, in my proposal call, in my contract, and it still happens. It still happens where somebody will start 1 month in, they'll be frustrated with results. And it's not realistic to expect results at that time anyways. So at least I can kind of go back and say, hey, we talked about this 3 or 4 different times. So that's kind of my approach nowadays. And it's not to demean people. It's just that bring it back to workability. This business is a service business about giving people something that helps them. That expectation makes it unworkable for me to even give them what they want. And it also doesn't work for us being able to deliver the work either. So it just comes back to we can't do our best work if that's an expectation.
Sean, what was the point? I mean, again, you could have kept working with these big agencies, working with really big clients with big budgets. What made you finally strike out on your own?
There's a few different reasons. Some of my really close friends became entrepreneurs. I mentioned previously, really briefly, that they're cinematographers and photographers. And that especially is a pretty interesting lifestyle when you're a 20-year-old. And so my friends, we're early 20s, and I'm in university and then working in the corporate world, and they're out there, truthfully, more successful than me in terms of career opportunities and finances. And they have flexibility, and they get to work with who they like to work with. So I've always been really inspired by those guys and entrepreneurship in general. So I've been studying it since day one, especially from working at that small agency. The owner has become a good friend of mine. He was a really positive entrepreneurial influence on me. So the number one thing I'll say is, again, entrepreneurship just excited me. I've always been somebody who's very self-driven. I just need something to care about. The other thing is, the reality is I ended up in a pretty high demand job. Let's put it that way. And it worked out, it was going great. I learned a ton. I was running ads for one of the biggest companies in Canada that a lot of people around the world have heard of. They were my only client. I was still at Group M, but I was managing a team of ad managers that were on their account. And it was a brand new agency that Group M had propped up for this client to do everything digital for them, from their traditional advertising, copywriters and creative direction, all the way to the digital media. And it was brand new, and the systems, talk about SOPs and lack of processes. This was a brand new agency they created out of thin air when they got that contract. And it was total startup mode, complete chaos. And it was incredibly stressful. And I just hit a breaking point where I just kind of realized, if I'm going to work, I have worked very hard and through a lot of stress as a business owner. I think every business owner, that's the price you pay. It's very hard to avoid that. But I knew that I wasn't really willing to do that for that company anymore at that point in time. It was an amazing learning opportunity. I met a lot of people who are good friends of mine, but I was inspired to strike out on my own and pursue entrepreneurship. And it kind of pushed me to a breaking point, which I'm actually grateful allowed me to get here as well.
When you struck out on your own, talk about the first big milestone from a client perspective, right? You go from working with these huge clients, then how do you go out and you have to get your own clients now?
Yep. Yeah. There's been so many milestones that it's pretty, I could name a whole bunch of them, but I'll just name the first one. But I think initially, the truth is I went out on my own. I was sending proposals and trying to create conversations and opportunities. Literally from the day I sat at the moment I sat at my desk until the end of the day. And my day would essentially, for most of that time, consist of going to the gym in the morning, sitting at my computer literally all day, unless we had dinner plans. My girlfriend and I had dinner plans with some friends. And I did that for months and months and months.
And when you sit at the computer, you're just setting off emails. What are you doing?
Setting off emails, setting up coffee meetings, just trying to like talk to people and learn from them as well. I had a business coach that I hired right off the start that helps people get established on Upwork and setting proposals on Upwork. So a lot of proposals, a ton. I think I counted it. I sent 70 proposals before I had 2 interested people. I didn't get either of those jobs. I think on proposal 84 is when I got a job. And it was a small job that sucked, to be honest with you.
The lucky 84.
Yep. Yeah.
Is that your hockey jersey? No.
That is not. No, that actually is not. But that would be pretty funny if it was. But yeah, so I would say getting the first client was a milestone. But there are a few different milestones there. I took me probably 2 months of, like I said, doing almost nothing but sending proposals all day and to get a job. Once I got one job, there's a little bit of evidence on the Upwork profile allowed me to get another job. Once you have 3, 4, 5 reviews publicly on your Upwork profile, it's one of those places. These are all verified reviews, right? Because the money and the job flows through the platform. You just start getting more. And social proof, ultimately, to this day, is the absolute biggest driver of more good qualified candidates reaching out to us. I think for me, the biggest milestone felt like when I could pay my bills. When I was back to, there were 2 milestones in that first 6 months. There was one when I could pay for everything I wanted at the time, my bills and going out for dinner, maybe a little bit more. The second milestone is probably when I hit the same income that I had. I got the balloons going on Zoom here from doing the peace sign, but the second milestone would be when I hit the same level of income that I used to have. That was a big milestone for me. That kind of felt like I'm going to be fine.
Yeah. I want to talk about hiring. I remember those days, Sean, where I would go out to eat on Friday just to celebrate the week. And I would go out with a friend. We'd go to Chili's and we'd split bottomless chips and salsa and a fajita platter. So like we were only spending whatever, it was like $15, whatever it was at the time, right? So because that's what we could afford. And that was like our big night out each week. So I don't take that for granted. In the beginning, it's you, right? You're doing everything, you're running everything. Talk about hiring and the key roles you put in place over time.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think this might be a good time for me to shout out my business coach, Mike Mole. So my girlfriend and I, we both work remotely. So we actually packed up and went down to Mexico to live in Mexico for about a year. And it was awesome waking up without winter. I'm in Canada here. I'm in Vancouver where we have the mildest winters in the country, but still, you still get a winter. And it's pretty nice to dodge that and get plenty of vitamin D. So we were doing that and working remotely, having a cheaper lifestyle, which was great as well. I think that was actually a valuable thing for starting my business, was being able to live somewhere where money went a lot further and I could reinvest more. But I'm walking along the beach one day and some of my friends from town, a group of Canadians down in Mexico, are just hanging out, having a little bonfire. And I meet this guy there named Mike Mole, and he's a business coach for solopreneurs who basically helps them put systems in place or build a team or a small business. And he had built agencies in the past for exactly what I do for PPC, for Google Ads and Facebook ads. And I was stuck on hiring. I was stuck on getting these contracts that didn't really pay enough margin to be able to hire people. I was at max capacity. Just the only way for me to make more money was to push myself further. And there wasn't really more to push. My stress levels were pretty maxed out, and so was my time and everything. But he helped me grow a team. And I grew a team by putting SOPs in place and putting standards and having everything be systematized. And I also learned a lot about hiring and who to hire and how to hire through working with him, somebody who's already been through this exact situation. So that was a game changer for me. I initially started hiring people in South America initially to get things going because, again, my problem at that time was my contracts weren't as large. And that's how I started, basically hiring people who were still fluent in English and excellent at what they do. They just lived in places where I could pay them amount they were really happy about. And it still worked for the size of the contracts that we were dealing with at that point.
What do you discover and learn in the hiring process? What does the hiring process look like?
Well, I have learned it's hard to find good people. And in my situation where I usually hire people as freelancers before we go beyond that and kind of try them out, essentially, I found one of the things is that I line people up well in advance. So when I know I'm going to have a capacity issue in 6 months, I'll start talking to people now. I'll start putting feelers out there. And it's partially to line up some good potential candidates. It's also to learn what people want. It's also to learn what kind of skill is available and what it costs at that point in time, because I think those things are always fluctuating depending on the job market. But what I definitely think that I've learned is that I hire the best fit for the job. It doesn't really matter where they are. I have somebody in Portugal. I have somebody in Brazil. I had a girl in Argentina at one point who ended up moving. I had someone in Peru. I had somebody in Costa Rica. I had a Canadian who was living in Costa Rica. I have someone in Vancouver. I have somebody in Toronto. So I've realized that for me, I just hire for the job. It really comes down to who's the best candidate. And that is the most important variable for me. I think that there's a lot of these rules in the marketplace where people say I'm only, if you're a Vancouver-based agency like me, it'd be easy for me to just only hire people in Vancouver. But I'm looking to have the best quality output we can possibly have. I'm not going to I really just look for the best people wherever they are. And I have found that a lot of them are not in North America, because you also need to look at incentivization. What kind of incentives are going to be exciting for people? And sometimes the incentives are hard to provide for people in certain places, depending on where they live. So that's one lesson. I think the other lesson is hiring people based on their excitement and interest. Somebody could be the best candidate for the job, but their demeanor is that this is a no-brainer for them and this is easy, and that's just an easy task for them. And then there's somebody else who's super curious and interested. I got hired at Group M, and the team leader at the time was hiring me for a job that was basically an associate manager, not a manager, but just one step beneath that. And there were people who were, when I first joined Group M, there were people who were coordinators who were better than me. And I kind of asked him, why am I in a role where there are people better than me down in the next role? And he basically said, I'm hiring based on ambition and interest and curiosity and your ability to learn. I'm hiring on where you're going to be in another year. I'm not necessarily hiring on where you're at now. And I have found that to be an incredibly successful strategy. If you have 5 candidates, but one of them is so much more curious and excited, that person's going to love the opportunity and they're going to go the extra mile to solve problems. And that's been a really valuable lesson for me.
That's a great one, Sean. Thanks for sharing that. I had David Baton on, who started Door Loop, and he was talking about this too. Exactly what you're talking about. I think they raised $130 million. They, at the time of 200, he's like, we're going to hire another 200 people this next year. I was asking him about how do you hiring 200 people in a very short period of time? And he said, what you said was basically making the process not difficult, but not easy, right? So the application's long. They're looking for people who put effort in and will create longer answers and actually put the effort and time in, as opposed to just kind of trying to glide through. You know what I mean? So I love that.
Hmm.
You mentioned Mike Moll. Obviously, mentorship's huge. I'd love to hear any other mentors. It could be colleagues of yours that you've learned from. It could be distant mentors, like books that you've learned from too. Who are some of your, mentors from colleagues or books or any resources?
Yeah, great question. One of the best things, well, mentorship and coaching has been priceless for me. So again, I mentioned Mike Mole. I had a different coach before Mike. I joined a separate program for a little bit as well for a different coaching program. I'm actually coaching with Mike Mole again right now. He has a genius opinion on sales. So we're working together for a little while now. But I think I would just, I could shout out their names, but it's basically other agency owners who are in the exact same position as me. Those people have been really awesome. There's a guy named Damian Forsyth who I've chatted with a bit. And my friend Daniela, she owns Findable, Findable Digital Marketing. They're an SEO company based out of Toronto.
I like that
Um,
name, Findable.
yeah, they're a really good SEO agency. I also have a friend named Alvin Ding who I chat with quite a bit, who used to be a growth manager at Airbnb and Upwork as well, actually. And so being able to collaborate and chat with them and a few other founders I know who are in similar positions has been priceless. Like I have basically quarterly calls with a lot of people like them, and we just talk back and forth about what's working for us and what we're learning and what we're not. I'm also part of an entrepreneurship community called the Dynamite Circle. So it's for remote first companies. It's a paid community to join, which it's not a lot to join, but you do need to apply and you do have to pay. And by doing that, it kind of gatekeeps it to being a pretty awesome group. And everyone there is a lot in a very similar situation to me. So I've been going to their meetups and what they are is they're a remote first company. They're like basically digital nomads, to be honest with you. Probably half of the people in the group are digital nomads. I met that community and a bunch of people in it when I was living in Mexico, meeting people who are true digital nomads, just bouncing around the globe, living in beach town to beach town while growing legitimate companies. And I found them to be an incredibly good resource because every time I go to a new city, I was down visiting Portland just on a road trip with my girlfriend in the summer, and I just message in the Portland channel and I go, "Hey, is anyone here?" And lo and behold, two guys who I met at the conference were there, and they brought out another friend and just had a great chat. And I do that everywhere I go because this community has people everywhere. So being part of communities of entrepreneurs is priceless. You can reach out to people. I think I don't know what it is. This one, it feels like because it's a paid community, there's kind of like a gate. And once you're in the gate, everyone will be friendly and open to you because you're almost like pre-vetted as being legitimate and interesting. So yeah,
I find the groups that I've been a part of that I pay for, people respect it more too, right? And they put effort in because they're paying for it, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%.
So we'll check that out for sure. On the paid ad side, first of all, that thanks for sharing some of those learnings, Sean. On the paid ad side, right? I'd love to hear learnings on that, right? And I know you work with all sorts of companies from sports retailers to telehealth to SaaS. Let's talk about SaaS for a second and talk about, a little bit about one of the SaaS companies you helped and what you did.
Yeah, of course. So we help quite a few SaaS companies. Probably about 33% of our clients are SaaS. So there's a lot of examples here. Most companies come to us when they've already been running ads for a while and they are failing or they're having problems because they are trying to have a generalist marketing manager run it, or they are running it themselves, or they're just not managing it. A lot of companies get rid of an agency and just don't manage it for about 6 months or a year until they have another wake up call and they are forced to find someone. This company that I'll share now, they basically generate contracts for a few different industries. So they came to us. They're based in Europe, but they do target. They're international. They're contracts that apply to a lot of different countries. And yeah, and we run their Google Ads campaigns. Um, they came to us, I think about 2 years ago now, and they just couldn't figure out how to scale their account. Ultimately, that was the main challenge. It was hitting the ceiling of what's profitable at a lot lower amount than we're hitting it now. So what we came in and optimized everything. We found more efficient ways to spend the money. We obsessed over what kind of creative assets they're using, what kind of imagery and video they're using, intentionally using a scientific method to test out different videos and images to identify what leads to better conversion rates. And through that and through a whole bunch of management, they're just one of many case studies. Long story short, every client on our roster is month to month. So I consider everyone who stays with us is winning. That's the only reason they would ever stay with us. But in this example, we've been able to basically double their ad spend and increase their ROAS by almost an entire point. So to be able to scale and improve ROAS is a pretty massive win for most companies.
I know you were saying, Sean, a lot of companies will come to you and it's just not working. So you go in and you probably audit the account. I'm curious, what are the biggest mistakes you see these companies making?
Yeah, great question. I would say some of the biggest mistakes would just be not modernizing the account. Google Ads has changed a lot. And let's just zoom out and look what's happened with technology in the last 3 years. AI has become front and center. And AI allows ad campaigns to do better as far as finding people who are likely to be consumers of yours when they're showing ads to anyone. And basically, I think the structures in Google Ads campaigns of how to structure your account, as far as where to break out campaigns, how many to have, what they should target, what settings. There was a relatively consistent time for like 7 years almost straight where things didn't change that much year over year as to what best practices were. In the last 3 years, that has changed quite a lot. Because if you just kind of think about what AI does, the magic used to be in what kind of settings, what really nuanced settings you can do compared to the other ad manager next door. Nowadays, a lot of those bidding settings are done automatically using AI. So the people getting the best performance have campaigns that are structured in ways that make AI function better. So a really simple example of that would be a lot of people would have like 8 campaigns and they only have 1 or 2 products, but they just have 8 different campaigns they're testing. The AI is on the campaign level, the bid strategies. So it's much more effective to have 1 or 2 campaigns that have way more data inside of it, because then the AI in the bid strategy can do a much better job of targeting the right audience, as opposed to having 8 campaigns with thin data. That's probably, if I were to say one thing that most companies do wrong, it's probably that. They segment their campaigns out into way too many small campaigns the way that used to make sense.
I'd love to, first of all, Sean, thank you. I have one last question. All right. Before I ask it, I want to point people to check out, you can learn more at keepersdigital.com to learn more, and you can check out more episodes of the podcast. And, for you, I'd love to hear about, you were mentioning the sales process a little bit, and you've kind of refined that. In the beginning, I love to see the evolution to what it looks like now. In the beginning, you're at the computer just firing off emails, right? And then it's, the lucky number 84 or whatever it is. You got the first client. Once you get someone in, talk about the process a little bit, because you were mentioning you have kind of a refined process for doing that. And that is an onboarding process of a client, right? From discovery call. What does that process look like for you? If someone's like, you know what, this sounds interesting, Sean, how does the process work, to work with you?
Yep. Yeah, I love this question. First thing I'll say is I don't give a proposal to anyone who I'm not confident I can deliver value. So there's a couple things, and there's a couple things in there. There's also clients that don't meet my criteria. And again, the criteria isn't for me to exclude people or anything like that. The criteria is because it limits our ability to do the best that we can. We're in a fortunate position where I have too many people reaching out, truthfully. But the reality is a lot of them are not the right fit. So before I even hop on a call, I am either filtering people saying, okay, can you let me know a little bit more about your company? Send me the URL. How many years have you been in business? What is your budget? What is your goal? And I usually try and get that information before I even book a discovery call. And this is just because I really have to safeguard our time with how many people are inquiring. And if they're not the right fit, I refer them to some other partners that we have who might be the right fit for them. I have a few agencies that are much more comfortable working with smaller accounts or companies that are brand new and have higher risks. So I'll refer them out. After that, I hop on a discovery call. My discovery call, the goal is to, again, tell people the expectations up front. As far as the realistic blanket expectations that I can give them about this is how ads work. I also tell them about our business, who we are. We're a Google Premier Partner Agency. We're expert vetted top 1% on Upwork. I got to kind of verify that they understand who they're on the phone with or who they're on a Zoom call with. And then I primarily just go in trying to understand their business inside and out. Again, there's a lot that goes into the success of ads that is beyond the ads. Like, do you have the ability to create good web pages? Do you have the ability to edit web pages so that we can A/B test them? What is your sales process like? There are companies that don't have any sales process. They just bank on people calling and signing up right away. Ads will never solve your problems if you don't have any processes in place at all. Ads amplify what you already have. So I make sure that they have the things on their end that lead to success. Otherwise, again, it's not about me excluding them. It's just about workability. They either have to be willing to put those in place or we're just not the right fit, because I can't do our best quality of work if they have all these limiting factors, because they will ultimately come back and be upset about it later.
It ends up being your fault.
Exactly. So I'm very upfront about all that. And I get as much information as I can. What is your close rate? What is your sales process? Do you do email marketing? Who handles sales? How many times do they follow up? What is the lifetime value of a customer? What is your close rate? I get everything. And then I take that and I do estimates, or I look at their ad account. And I do actually come to the table with something tangible for the next call. Again, at the odd time, I will go and do the estimates for a company. The estimates don't look good. They actually are a massive red flag that Google ads or Facebook ads are not the right channel for them. And I'll just be honest, because again, I'm a service provider. I'm a business owner. That's what I would want people to do for me. So it's again another stage of the vetting process. The hope is that when I hop on the sales call, I'm only hopping on with qualified people who are in the right fit to succeed. And then I'll give them a proposal that's not based on nothing. It's not just based on this is who we help and this is the price. It's based on I literally looked into your business. I'm confident that we can bring value. Here's the exact strategy and everything we will need to succeed. And here are the estimates that apply to your specific industry, because the cost per click is always different depending on different industries and different places. So my proposals are very tailored to what they need. And then if they say yes, some companies say yes on the call. Some companies say yes a week later. Some companies say yes in 3 months or 6 months. As soon as they say yes, my project manager immediately sends them an onboarding guide. The onboarding guide has instructions like send us access to this, send us this, send us this. If you have any files, put them in this folder. And it literally details every step. And it has questions of all the information we need. And as long as that's filled out, we can onboard very quickly. And then my project manager can send them access or request access to their account, send them the contract, send them the invoice, and it's all quite smooth from there.
Love it. No, I appreciate that, Sean. Thank you. Thanks for sharing. I want to encourage people to check out keepersdigital.com, more episodes of the podcast, and we'll see everyone next time. Sean, thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I'm feeling like 100 grand.